Hi, welcome and good morning to everybody calling in today for this webinar with Cloudflare and Kentik. Thank you for joining, and we understand that your time is valuable, and I want to make sure that this webinar is not only helpful but informative to all of you. To kick things off, today we're fortunate to have our partner Kentik along with us. They will be discussing how Cloudflare Magic Transit works with Kentik to detect and mitigate DDoS attacks, and they'll be talking specifically about network flows. I'd like to introduce our speakers. Our speakers today are Louis Poinsignon, Network Software Engineer at Cloudflare, and Ian Pyle, Co-founder and Chief Scientist at Kentik. Before we get going, I want to do some quick housekeeping items here. We will be holding Q&A at the end of, after the presentation, so the end of the webinar. So please stay on. If you have questions that pop up along the presentation, please enter them into the Q&A window. Any other issues that you might have with the platform, please put them into the chat. We will try and address them as best we can. So without further ado, I want to jump to a quick survey. So hold on one second that we have for you guys. So the question, what is your experience on Netflow? Hopefully you've heard it. If not, it's a great time to learn about it. We have two excellent speakers here who will walk you through what we're doing. All right, love it. 68% love it. 18% here to learn, and all right, 6.3 are ready to go implement it next week. That's awesome. So with that, let's just kick things off. I'm going to hand this over to Luis to go ahead and introduce himself and start the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Louis. I work at Cloudflare. I'm doing everything that's Netflow related at Cloudflare, and thanks for organizing this webinar. I'm going to present Netflow. So a few of you have already heard of it, I hope you would still learn something. But I'm just present how we use flows at Cloudflare and how it's used with Kentik and DDoS attacks, DDoS mitigation. So let me just start with, if Maslow was a network architect, the pyramid of needs basically would be, if you have functioning hardware, you can have, once you have functioning hardware, you can set up data and monitoring, which enables you to have security to protect yourself against attacks. And once you have all of those, you can do automation. So you can't have, for instance, security without proper monitoring, or you can't have automation without some security. So you need to have good hardware as well to do data monitoring. There's multiple ways of doing data monitoring. Some of them are IPAM, SNMP, and flow monitoring. So this presentation just focuses on flow monitoring, but if you have a network, please set up as much monitoring as you can. So okay, let's start with the basics. Internet is made of packets. Network devices transfer tens of millions of packets, reaching gigabits per second, hundreds of gigabits per second. And this is often done with special hardware and software. So devices are very good at counting, but they're not necessarily very good at analyzing. They're made for a very simple task, which is moving packets. So as a result, you can have, if your network is attacked, you will be able to see through analytics graphs, for instance. So this is one of the graphs, and we see a 70 increase to 60 gigabits per second on one interface. So this is the number of bits per second on one interface, lasted 3 hours. But the problem is we don't know what it's made of. We don't know how can we protect against it. Like, this attack's happening, but what's inside of it. And among the packets, there's so much we can make sense of. We have lots of layers in the OSI model. We have lots of protocols that can give us information in order for us to filter the attacks. And this is why I want to introduce flows for the people who've never seen that, for the people who've never seen flows or just know some of the terms. Flows are a generic term that stands usually for a packet sample that is taken from the router and sent to a collector. So you get the actual packets or fields that consist of a packet. So all the fields that you've seen before inside flows. Oops, one slide too fast. So there's a lot of protocols that you may have heard, like Netflow, IPFix, Sflow, Jflow, NetStream. All of those packets are flows, and they are sent to a collector by your network device. So just to give you a little timeline, flows are quite old. Like the first specification was Netflow v1 by Cisco in 1996, then Netflow v5 in 2002, and then Sflow 2004, IPFix in 2008. And both companies, Cloudflare and Kentik, are much more recent, 2009, 2014. So we were able to capitalize on this and use these protocols to build our mitigation systems. There's two types of flows. So diving a bit into the protocols, there's two types of flows that you have to understand. The first one is template-based, and the second one is packet-based. So template-based are all the Netflow, IPFix, Jflow, NetStream, or Cflow. The flow packets are a list of fields that is provided by a template. It is extremely fast to parse, and it's very common. On the contrary, there's packet-based flow with Sflow, Kentik Kflow, VPC logs. It gives you access to the raw packet header, like the entire packet. It's very exhaustive. But on the contrary, it requires more resources to process it, and not every network device is compatible. So when you build your monitoring system, you have to pick which one you want to use. You can also do both, depending on the capabilities. So for instance, just to summarize, a DNS packet, which is in the middle of this slide, is going to be extracted into Sflow, and the header, that's the orange part, while on Netflow, only specific fields are going to be extracted. So as you can see, you may actually get more information from Sflow, but it's longer to read, it takes slightly more space. So back to the attack graph. So now that you have your flows, what does it tell you? You have destination port, for instance, and you can see, for instance, that your attack, half of it was port 4043, HTTPS, and destination port 80. But it's not enough. It may still be what you already knew. It may not help you with the attack by itself. It's not enough. It gives you lots of information, but it may not be enough to filter the traffic. So this is the next step in using flows. It's your enrichment pipeline. So it's adding more information to those flows, which can be network data, like which ISP is it, which network provider is it, what's the geolocation, which country does it come, where the packet is coming from, what's the threat information? Sorry, I say there's a typo. Threat information, like what's the status, the score of this network or this IP address. And finally, what's the application that was used when the flow was sampled? So all of this data is enriching the flows, the sample. It adds way more information that you can use after that you store the packets, and that you can use in your Grafana, in your remediation pipeline, as part of fingerprinting. So it gives you much more information. The enrichment, for instance, if you take one flow, it will map the destination IP to a country, to a threat, the network. There's two ways of doing this as well. You can do the lookup before the insertion. So that means you actually spend storage, you use storage to do this. Or you can do it at query time, which may take more compute because you have to look up the field. One of the use cases that we did with these flows and was mapping during COVID. So that is just giving you a use case on like how do we use the enrichment on our side. Was during COVID, we compared 2 days. We compared the amount of traffic that happened before COVID and after COVID during the lockdowns. And having the geolocation by zip code, we were able to know that people left some of zip codes and went to other zip codes. And this was made with the enrichment pipeline of flows. So for instance, on the two picture, you have Manhattan that gets empty and all the business districts of Los Angeles that gets empty. So all the red parts is where there's less traffic than we expected. And green is where there's more traffic than we saw before. So now that you have this enriched flows, back to the attack graph, you can now split in two. This is the attack traffic with destination port 80, 443, with the source, evil network, let's say. That's going to be considered your attack traffic. And you have your legitimate traffic, which is port 80, 443, but it's not coming from a malicious internet provider. So now that we know, could we filter this traffic automatically? What are the mitigations? So just taking a moment here, just to summarize what we saw, flows are used at Cloudflare. We use an open source collector that we developed. We monitor in 200 points of presence. We use it for both use cases, which is planning with long-term metrics. Like you see also with COVID, we did the analytics on the geolocation, see where the traffic was moving from and to. And we also do operations, like very recent, very granular data to know about the attacks. We have a second pipeline which is in charge of detecting the attacks as well, which is called Gatebot. So this is used. It's been documented on our blog, but it helps the servers scrub the evil packets. And we also use all of this data as part of the peering portal. So if you're on ISP and you peer with us, you can see your traffic, and it's coming from flows. And we use also in radar.cloudflare.com, which is our public traffic analysis tool of all the countries in the world. So parts of it use flows. And overall, why should you set up flows? Because as the first slide, like the pyramid you see, it allows you to build tools on top of it and to troubleshoot issues faster. It also provides you alternative data source. If you use HTTP logs, or you have a second data source which can give you more or redundant information just in case something happens. You can also do cost-based analytics. The advice that we give is, if you have to use flows, try to use SFlow if your hardware supports it. Allows as much team as you can to use this data, not just the network team, for instance. And if you control your storage, aggregate the old data. There's no point on keeping very granular data. Make sure that you have API SQL accesses so that you can query and build those tools with ease. And this webinar is also how we do with Kentik, because Kentik provides this whole pipeline, provides this end-to-end SaaS service which collects, enrich, stores, visualize, and detect among the flows. And Cloudflare and Kentik collaborated a lot as well for instance, if you use RPKI, you can have enrichment with RPKI routing security-based enrichment in Kentik. And on our side, our flows use also parts of Kentik's open source libraries. And as I said before, the mitigation, Kentik can be used to detect attacks and trigger a mitigation tool, which is Cloudflare Magic Transit, as a protection. And now I'm going to hand it to Jan to talk about Cloudflare and Kentik and Magic Transit's DDoS mitigation for entire networks.
Thank you. That was a great rundown. Just a little quick intro to me. Founded Kentik in 2013, and previous to that, I was working as an analytics engineer at Cloudflare. So our collaboration goes way back. That whole presentation was like, hopefully got everyone excited about flow and like, this is great. And then you go into the nitty gritty and you're like, it's actually kind of complicated to set up. If only there was some SaaS product that was all set up and could let me do it for you. That's really what Kentik is. It's just a big Netflow collector in the cloud. The other part is everyone here is probably really excited about Cloudflare, and they're like, yeah, it's great that you can cache all your layer 7 requests. You have got all these pops. But wait, hey, I'm a transit provider. I'm pushing packets, and I want that same DDoS magic, but I don't. But I can't use it because it's layer 3, layer 4, and that's really where Magic Transit comes in. It's a new product by Cloudflare that basically is a big cloud scrubbing service. So you can turn it on, you can set it up, and then as soon as it's triggered, your routes, it works off of BGP. Cloudflare will start announcing your route, and your traffic will go through the cloud scrubbing service. And it's a clean pipe service. So as soon as it comes in, it comes out, and it's totally good. So here's another sort of a rundown of what Magic Transit is. It's sort of, as you can see, it's as soon as you turn it on, it works on a /24 or higher, and you will suck in all of that traffic into the Cloudflare network. It'll go to the closest POP. It will go through the Cloudflare network, so it's not the public internet. And then you'll only get the clean traffic going into your data center. And then one twist is that we egress over the public internet, not back through the Cloudflare network. So the tricky thing here is that maybe you want to save some money. So Magic Transit is a little bit expensive, so you have to only want to turn it on when you're actually under attack. This is where Kentik comes in. Kentik listens to your flow. We have exactly the same flow pipeline that Louis described. So there's two parts. There's the historical pipeline, and then there's the anomaly alerting and real-time DDoS section. So we send all the flow into the anomaly alerting, and one of the questions is, what is an anomaly? So it could either be volumetric, like all of a sudden I've got a big spike in packets or bytes, or it could be, hey, my ASN's suddenly shifted, or I'm actually having a real drop-off in traffic. So we have statistical and machine learning models, which are constantly baselining for basically any of those fields that you see in flow. You can pick out really any of those fields like source IP, dest IP, port, ASN, BGP, AS pass, anything like that. And whenever anything changes, you can sort of set a baseline. So anything changes that's over 2x threshold, say, we'll do something. The basic something here is we'll send an email, send a PagerDuty, send to ServiceNow, you name it. We also integrate with hardware-based on-premise appliances, such as Radware and A10. And then just now, we're talking to the Cloudflare Magic Transit. So we'll notify Magic Transit that this particular /24 is under attack. Cloudflare will start announcing that from every single POP. And then all of a sudden, that attack is over as far as your network is concerned. Go into sort of the details here. You've got a user, you've got the internet. This is sort of the base case where you're avoiding the Cloudflare transit, but you are sending flow to the Kentik platform. Now there's an attack. We make an API call, and all of a sudden, Cloudflare starts announcing that route. No more attack. We're all happy. As soon as Cloudflare detects that the attack is done, we will tell Cloudflare to withdraw the route, and the traffic goes back to how it was before. One note here is that there's a limited time offer. Sign up now, and you can try out both Cloudflare Magic Transit and the Kentik platform for free for 4 months. So there's no cost to you. Give it a shot, kick the tires, and we'd love to hear what you think. And with that, my presentation's over, and we'd like to turn it into the Q&A.
Hey, Mike's here. I'm back. Thank you, guys. Great presentation, by the way. We have a number of questions queued up. If anybody else has more questions, please put them in the console. One I just put in, like you just mentioned, we have a free trial. Please take a look at this if you're interested. We have the link there. Don't hesitate to follow up with us. Going into some of the questions here. First question here, beyond DDoS, why should I care about flow?
Should I take it? Or,
Sure, go for it. No, go for it.
Okay. So basically, back on the flow presentation, it gives us, at Cloudflare at least, it gives us a lot of strategy. It's helpful for strategy. It helps with planning. You know where you want to put a new data center, for instance. You know where you want to put a new internet exchange. Where do you have to peer? And this is what Flows gives you. It's also this kind of strategy, this analytics to expand your network. Additionally, in some cases, it provides you redundancy with other databases, for instance, with audits. If not necessarily DDoS, but if there was strange traffic that went through your network, you are able to see using flows if an evil packet crossed your network. And just the glass case is just as day-to-day operation. It's just know where our packets are coming from and going to, and just making sure that we offer the best service quality. Like we serve this country in the closest spot, for instance. So that's what flows are.
And piling on that, one big thing, which I think both of our companies do, is we combine BGP with flow. And so for every flow record we receive, we enrich it with the BGP route of the router at that time. So you can really see exactly where did once that packet left that router, where did it go? And you can really verify that's going to how you would expect it to go. The other big case that we run into is sort of forensic analysis. And so you have a server and it got hacked, and you're really interested in knowing who it talked to, let's say 3 months ago, and Flow can tell you that.
Great. All right, we had 2 new questions come in. One, I'm a Kentik user. What is the cost of this service in Cloudflare? Well, I think the short answer is we have a 4-month trial. I don't know if Ian or Luis, you have an answer for that?
You need to talk to your sales rep.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yes. Cool. So let's keep going. are the...
I can say that it's a, oh, sorry, one other note here is it's a free service for anyone that's currently using the Kentik platform.
Right. Let's see here. Here's another one. Are the integrations limited to mitigate victim IP, or are hint/additional context given so the IDMS isn't cold?
So how does the Cloudflare limited victim IPs? We mitigate indeed the attacks, but on the Cloudflare product itself, I'm not sure. Unfortunately, you need to contact also a representative at Cloudflare. I think Kentik can give you context for the attacks.
Yeah, we have a flow spec integration, so we can push a flow spec route out to you that includes basically however you want to configure it. So you can do rate limiting, or you can talk about the source of the desk IP port, what have you.
Great. See here. Another interesting question. What are the options for mitigation methods and pros and cons?
So that sounds like a, let me see here. I'm just going to speak to sort of the Kentik side of this. So there's a bunch of mitigation methods. The easiest one is you can just do RTBH, so real-time black hole. And that's basically saying for any packet to this address, drop it. And that works great if you are a hosting provider, for example, and you just want to drop all of the attack traffic to the target. The downside of that is that you've effectively won the DDoS for the DDoSer. You've taken the target offline. So this is a stop the pain and stop it from hurting other people approach. Now, and this is where FlowSpec came out, is it lets you be a little bit more nuanced, and you can really dive in and try to only drop the packets you want. The flip side of this is that FlowSpec is very easy to shoot yourself in the foot. And so there's a lot of war stories about outages caused by incorrect FlowSpec rules that were pushed out. The next step up is you can buy a hardware appliance. So this is AT and Radware are sort of the two big ones right here. And they work great, but they have the baggage of a appliance. So it depends on if you want to work with an appliance solution or you want a cloud solution. And then the new kids on the block are really Cloudflare and sort of their cloud-based systems where it's all software defined and you don't have to worry about buying a box and keeping it powered and everything.
Just a little word on the Cloudflare network. We can, if I'm recalling the numbers correctly, we can mitigate. We have 46 terabits per second of capacity. So we can theoretically mitigate up to this amount of attacks, which tends to be higher than most boxes.
Okay, so let's move on to another question. Can you use Flow to detect other types of attacks and malicious activities?
If I'll take it. So at Cloudflare, we often see layer 7 attacks. So those attacks are much lower volume, and they try to exhaust all the resources on the servers or the application. And the particularity with these attacks is they will be requiring fingerprinting usually. They are more based on the packets. So flows can help. And we also advise to use S-Flow in that case because it usually sometimes goes out. Like it's not the same fields. You will try to detect on different fields that are not present in Netflow. You can use it, but it's not the most efficient method. It's good as a backup as well. So definitely, it's better for layer 3 because you can see all the volume. But for layer 7, you may want to look at more precise on the server analysis, flow analysis.
Give a shout out here for FastNetmon. They're just a sort of an open source tool. The guy works at Cloudflare. They're pretty cool too, and they can sort of do some of this on the server side as well.
Okay. Another question here: are all DDoS attacks layer 3 attacks?
I can take that. So there's if you think about DDoS, the goal here is to remove the service. And so there's a lot of ways you can do it. The dumbest way is just to send a whole bunch of UDP packets into a pipe and effectively just stop up the pipe. But there's a whole world of layer 7 attacks where when you think of your typical web stack, the weakest point is going to be any layer that contains state, so the database. So you want to profile the website, figure out what's the most expensive SQL call that page is making to load that page, and then make it do that SQL call over and over again. So that effectively you can, if you're willing to spend the time to really understand the target application, you can craft application level requests, which are much more damaging with much fewer number of packets. Now, the flip side of this is you can't be spoofing where those packets are coming from. So you have to. There's a whole world of how do you sort of use compromised hosts to launch these reflected attacks.
All right. We'll probably take 2 more, and I think we'll call it a day. The next question: is there a performance impact on user experience during the mitigation?
So on the Cloudflare side, when you enable mitigation, it will go through Cloudflare. Your packets may take a slightly longer path because it needs to go through us and then go to you. But we try to keep it very minimal because we have 200 points of presence, and we hope that it's a very short distance added. It's a small cost that adds, but at least your servers will be protected. It would be unlikely that it cause user impact.
And Ian, did you have anything to add there?
It's this is one of those things where there's not really a one-size-fits-all solution. It really depends on the type of attack and how aggressive it is. What I can say is that the software is very good at filtering out all the packets. Typically, you will see some increased latencies, but the goal of everyone is to make it so the user will never notice those increased latencies.
Great. And for our last question, let's see here. How can you reduce false positives to avoid alarm fatigue or unnecessary mitigation actions?
So that's a great question. So what I can say is we're going into, we started out with a very sort of naive baseline approach where you're looking at number of standard deviations from normal. And then we did find that there was a fair bit of false positive there. So now we're looking at both Bayesian statistics and some pretty advanced model-based machine learning to really fine-tune that and only alert when basically toss out all the sort of the flukes, like, hey, it happened to be, this is a holiday, so there's less traffic than you'd expect, or this is Black Friday, so it's a big one like that. And then really just very sharply focused on what you actually care about.
All right. Well, we're about 35 minutes in. I think we've answered a good number of questions today. Like I said, we will be sending out the presentation slides in, if not next week, probably the following week. And we appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for calling in, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you all.